On like your tips for writing short fiction, like tons of them involve like leaving stuff out or cutting. Can you maybe provide a more in-depth example of that, like with like an example with actual plot, actual prose? Because it can be really hard, especially like when someone's a baby. Like you're just like, but it's such a beautiful phrase.
The thing I've cut the most was the story I've mentioned before. That basically, when I wrote it, it had some kind of political kind of in jokes inside it, and it had and basically I decided, well, if I want to cut this down, I have to get rid of those jokes. They aren't really essential to the plot. And another example is the story mostly takes place where this kind of underground doctor does some body enhancements. And someone comes in wanting a special modification to his stomach. And so I start off that he comes in, the receptionist, asks who he is, and he refuses to say who he is, and eventually she buzzes the doctor to let him know that someone who doesn't want to be identified is here. Well, I just got rid of the receptionist character. She was totally useless within the story, and I just had the customer dealing directly with the doctor. And one of the things about cutting is almost always there is more to cut than you think. The story I think that is my best ever is The Robot Sorcerer. It starts off from what I call zeroth point of view, from the point of view of a non-sentient robotic lander that is computerized, and it's just kind of going through various routines, and it's almost like a log file of things that are going on. And I ran it through my critique group, and they said, well, this is interesting stuff, but there's just too much of it there, and so you need to cut it back. So I cut it back, and I ran it through another critique group, and they said, well, you really need to cut that back some. And so I cut it back. I cut it back to the absolute bone. I was sure there was not another word that could be cut from that prologue-y thing. But it was absolutely necessary to the story. I couldn't cut the whole piece out. But I was like, this is the absolute essential. There is no way I can cut another word from this. And I sent it off to the editor of Intergalactic Medicine Show, and he said, Eric, I want to buy it. It's great. But can you cut a third from that prologue thing? Okay. And so I went through and word by word, I managed to trim a third of the words off of that. And it was really, really tough. It was like, killing my darlings, and in the end, the story was actually stronger for that. Because that point of view is kind of off-putting, and it was putting readers off, and the longer it was, the more it put readers off. And so cutting it down. But I really ought to see if I can post online the before and the after so that you can see what words I cut and stuff like that. So. Yes.
Could you maybe follow up with like how that's different from when like you're trimming novels? Because you also write novels,
The current problem I have with novels is that in the words of an editor who looked at my novel, he said, it reads like a short story. And what he meant by that was there's not much description in it. There's a lot of dialogue, there's a lot of action, not much description. Essentially, what I've had to go and do is expand my novel rather than cut it down. And so if you're trying to get say a 150,000 word novel down to 100,000 words, or a 450,000 word novel down to 300,000 words, it's the same sort of thing, except in novels it's easier to do it by cutting scenes or combining scenes, rather than just solely on cutting words from each scene, but cutting words from each scene also helps. The processes are substantially similar, I think. Just getting rid of words that aren't really needed, finding ways to say things more concisely, stuff like that. Yes?